Hello everyone, welcome to chapter 8 Vital Villages, Thriving Towns. In this video, basically we are going to study about the socio-economic life of the people living in the Indian subcontinent around 500 BC and thereafter. How the people used to live in those villages and towns. Were there any traders, farmers and craft people? How they used to operate, etc., etc. All these questions we are going to deal with in this video. So without any further ado, let's get started. Iron tools and agriculture. Basically, iron is a very important element in our daily life, and we all know it. We use different kind of products of iron, and iron is also used as a raw material in different industries to make their own tools and equipments. So yes, iron has a great importance at this moment. But was iron so important in our past? Was it so beneficial to the people in those times? Let's see. The usage of iron basically started from 1000 BC onwards. Okay, and this was the time of megalithic age. Okay, this was the megalithic age starting. What is megalithic? Megalithic is basically a period when we used to find burials in the southern India, especially burials with big boulders, okay, big stones around dead bodies, so this was the time. Okay, this was the time or a starting period of the megalithic age. Okay, when around those burials people used to put big stones, okay, big stones in a circle. Like this is a dead body, so they used to put big stones here like this. Okay, and here the person used to be there. Okay, the dead person, and then all the metal jewelry, iron equipments and tools which belonged to that person, pottery, jewelry, etc., etc. All these things used to be put in his grave. Okay, so this was all about the megalithic starting. Okay, megalithic starting of the megalithic period. And in this period only, okay, when we found in those graves the iron equipments and tools, okay, these iron tools and equipments, this was the first time when we found, okay, we saw in the Indian subcontinent iron tools and equipments. That's how we got to know that yes, iron usage has been started. Okay, iron is being used now by the people. People knew that how to use iron, and they started making different kinds of tools, as you can see in this picture. This is a tong, this is axe, and this is sickle. So this was all about the starting of iron usage, but it was not so on a big scale. It was not an extensive usage of iron. But what happened by the time of 500 BC, around 500 BC, we see that iron is being used on an extensive scale. Okay, on a big scale, extensive usage of iron is taking place. How? With iron in iron plowshare, we get to see that farmers are using iron plow and increasing their production. Okay, iron is also used for cutting of the forest, okay, to clean a land for agricultural production. Okay, cutting of forests. So iron was used in various purposes. Okay, but what happened by the time of 500 BC, we see there was the rise of Mahajanpadas. Okay, if you have seen my previous videos, you would notice that I have told you there was the rise of Mahajanpadas. These were the big kingdoms. Okay, big kingdoms in the Ganga Valley. Okay, big kingdoms. So the rise of Mahajanpadas was basically accompanied by the thriving towns. Okay, the rise of towns and the big cities. Okay, big capital cities. We see the big capital cities growing in this time. Okay, that is around 500 BC. We are talking about 500 BC around. So what was the reason of these capital cities? Okay, rise of these capital cities. Basically, it was dependent on agricultural production. Okay, because see, food and water are the basic necessities of a human being. If there will be enough food and enough water, then the human being will be able to focus his attention on other activities. Okay, so due to agricultural production, increment in the agricultural production, these big cities, big capital cities could rise. Okay, they grew into bigger towns, which was small villages, but they slowly and gradually grew into these capital cities with the growth of trade and agricultural production. Now, what were the reasons for the increment in the agricultural production? First one was the iron plow, as I just told you. Okay, usage of iron plow, because it is better to use the iron plow as it can upturn the soil. Okay, it can upturn the soil in a much better way than the wooden one. Okay, because in the Indus Valley civilization, if you have watched the previous videos, you would notice that in the Indus Valley civilization we have wooden plow, and wood is delicate compared to the iron, because wood can break, or it cannot upturn the soil as properly as iron plow can do. So of course, the iron plow had a great impact on the increment of agricultural production. Second reason was irrigation. Okay, a good supply of irrigation due to canals. Okay, canals and artificial lakes, which was built by the rulers in those times. Okay, the rulers in those times, they built these structures and ensured the farmers for the good supply of water. So due to this, there was a great increment in the agricultural production. Again, second reason. Now the third reason was the transplantation. Okay, the process of transplantation. It also had a major impact on the production of crops, because you see, if you grow paddy, okay, if you are growing rice, then you first take the seeds to nursery. Okay, you sow the seeds. Okay, here you sow the seeds, and then they start growing little. They're growing, and after a certain period of time, when they have grown a little, they have become stronger, then you take them to the farm. Okay, then you plant them into the farm where they grow into full grown crops. So this was all about the transplantation process. Okay, this is all about the transplantation process, which started in this time and led to the increment in crop production. Okay, this is all being told here, and I've told you here, so you can have a look on this text if you want to. Otherwise, we'll move on. Okay, now we are given here the table. It is I'll tell you what is being told here in this table. Basically, the king need army. Okay, basically the king need money for the army to build big palaces and forts, because king has to protect his kingdom from his enemies. Okay, he wants to live a good life, he wants to live a big life. That is why he needs money for all these purposes, for the army. Okay, for his big palaces and forts, so that he can show his power and strength to the people, that he is so powerful. So you need money for all that. Okay, money is important. Money will come only from the revenue. Okay, revenue will only generate when there is good agricultural production. All right, it is all interconnected. Good agricultural production is important for a good amount of revenue, because agricultural production was the basic primary activity of the people living in the village economy, and villages were the main part of revenue. Okay, revenue generation. So a good agricultural production will only be there if there is good amount of irrigation. You see, irrigation will ensure a good supply of water. And how will the irrigation take place? When there will be canals. Okay, there will be canals and wells. These structures will be there. How will they come? They will come only when king will finance. Okay, king will give the money for the construction of these structures. The finance will come from the king, and the labor who will work on these sites, labor will be provided by the people. okay, people living in that area. So due to this, there will be increment in the agricultural production, okay, increment in the agricultural production, and revenue will increase. And due to this, there will also be a certainty, okay, there will be certainty with the farmer that yes, there is good supply of water, so he is not dependent on the monsoon, okay. So certainty will be there in the crop production for the farmer as well. So it is beneficial for the farmer too, okay, in the long run. Okay, so all this is given here in this table. You can have a look. Now we will move on to the village life. Firstly, we will see the village in the southern Indian subcontinent, okay, southern part, and then we will move on to the northern one. Firstly, in the southern Indian subcontinent, we see in the villages there are basically three groups of people, okay. At the top we have the Vellalar, okay, Vellalar. These were the large land owners, okay, big land owners who had a good amount of land under them. They used to hire these slaves, and we'll talk about them. They used to hire and make the landless laborers work on their fields, and then give some money in return to them so that they can earn their living. So these were big landowners who had good amount of money and power, and they were at the top of the chain in the village economy. Second were Ujjavar, okay, Ujjavar. These were basically ordinary people, ordinary farmers who lived in the villages. They were independent, okay, they were independent, of course, but they were small, okay, small owners, small landowners, not as big as Vellalars. Third one is landless laborers, okay, landless laborers and slaves, which are called as Kadai Siyar and Adimai, okay, Adimai. Please remember these terms; they are important from the exam point of view. They can come in your exam. So Kadai Siyar and Adimai were at the lowest part of this chain. They did not have any land, and they were many times they were discriminated as well. There were hardships, lot of hardships for them. They had to work on the land of these big land owners, the Vellalars, and in turn get little amount of money so as to earn a living, and that was their life basically. So this is about the village economy given here, okay. There are many things, but we will only confine ourselves to the NCERT here. When I make the other videos, then we will talk in depth about these topics. Okay, so moving on to the villages in northern Indian subcontinent, okay. In this village economy in the northern part, we see at the top of the chain there is Gram Bhojak, okay, Gram Bhojak. All this thing is written here in the text. You can have a look, all right, but I'm writing here so that it can be clear to you. Gram Bhojak was the headman, okay. He was the headman of the village at the top of the chain in the village economy in the northern part of Indian subcontinent. Keep it in mind. We are talking about the northern part now, not the southern one. So Gram Bhojak is at the top. He was like you can compare him with the Vellalar of the southern India. Gram Bhojak had a good amount of money and land under him. He had a huge power as well. He acted like a judge, judge and a police basically in the village economy in the northern Indian subcontinent villages. So yeah, he was at the top of the chain. Now below him we see Grahapatis, okay, Grahapatis. These people were ordinary farmers, okay, ordinary farmers basically, who were independent. Of course they were independent. They could earn their living. They could earn by growing their own crops, but they were not as rich as Gram Bhojak, and you can compare them with the Ujjavars in the southern part. The villages in the southern part. You can compare Grahapatis with the Ujjavars as we just read, okay. So Grahapatis is done. Now after Grahapatis we see the landless laborers and slaves, which were called as Das Karmakaras, okay, Das Karmakaras. These people were basically the landless laborers and slaves who used to work on the land of Gram Bhojak, okay. They used to work on the land of Gram Bhojak, and they were at the lowest part of this chain. They were, you can compare them with the Kadai Siyar and Adimai in the southern part. Okay, so how do we know all this? Okay, what I just told you, how do we know all this? We know all this from some of the earliest Tamil compositions. Okay, the Tamil compositions, especially in respect to southern part, we have a good resource of these Tamil compositions, and one of them is Sangam literature. Okay, Sangam literature is very is it's a good resource basically. Okay, which tells us a lot about the socio-economic and cultural life of the people living in southern part. Okay, southern villages. It's a good resource, Sangam literature. So what was Sangam literature basically? It was an assembly. Okay, assembly of poets who came in Madurai. Okay, they came to Madurai. They used to meet in Madurai and write about the life of people in cities and villages. They used to write about kings, about the rulers. Okay, write like good things about them, that they were warriors and they were champions of this and that, and all this was being written in Sangam literature. And in return, ruler used to give them money or rent-free lands, so as to so as to consolidate his position, that yes, he's a good man, he's a protector of his kingdom and of his people. So it was like give and take between them. So this is Tamil compositions, basically Sangam literature, written around 300 BC. Keep it in mind. Okay, so this is all about Sangam literature. Now we'll move on to the cities. How do we know about the city life? Okay, basically city life, we have stories about the stories is an important resource. Then travelers the people who used to go from one place to another. Okay, for the trade or just for an adventure, etc., etc. And then we have archaeology and sculptors, basically who did the artistic work on the walls of the buildings, on the pillars, and tried to show city life, city life and the beautiful scenes on the walls. So this was also an important resource. Firstly, talking about the stories, we have Jataka stories. Okay, Jataka stories is an important resource. Okay, you must have heard a lot of Jataka stories regarding Gautam Buddha, but it is not just confined to the Buddhism, but there are many topics other than religious field as well. Like secular topics. There are many stories which are secular in nature, not related to any religion basically, but related to the city and village life. So Jataka stories is an important resource. Then we have other things as well, like we have the sculptors, archaeology, okay, who carved beautiful scenes on the walls of buildings. Just like this is a good example. See how beautifully it is carved. Okay, this artistic work, this animal is here, people are trying to do something. Okay, some people are standing, there's a tree here, and all this is a beautifully carved scene. Okay, which is from a site in Sanchi. Okay, Sanchi is in Madhya Pradesh, remember. So this is a stupa site where it must have been carved on some railings of a stupa. Okay, most probably it will be from on the railings or on the walls of the stupa site, which is in Madhya Pradesh. So see, this is a beautiful scene. This is a good example. Okay, see how the artist is trying to depict the scene of city life on this on this railing, on this wall of this stupa. Okay, so this is done. All right, this all is done. Here, there is one story about the clever poor man. This it's a Jataka story, basically a secular in nature, not related to any religion. But this is the author is trying to tell here that there was one poor man and how he applied his mind by selling a dead rat for 1 rupee. And then how he arranged money for himself by giving and by taking. But so it is a Jataka story basically. You can have a look at it. It's not so important from the exam point of view, but we will move on. Okay, so this there is another picture given here about a structure which is known as ring well. Okay, it's like a ring. You can see here the rings one above the another. So this structure was also found in the city life, this shows us that people used it maybe for the dumpage of garbage, for the trash, or they may used it as a toilet, so for these purposes they used these kinds of structures in their houses. Basically, we found it in a house. So just compare it with the Harappan civilization. If you see that there was drainage system, okay, like drains used to come like this and connect to the main drain, okay, the main drain of the city. This was the main drain, and these were the drains from houses. So this was the Harappan civilization. This was from the Harappan, okay, drain from houses. But here you see that we have a ring wells, okay, like different structure. How with the time people change their habits and change their structures, change the urban structures basically. So yeah, this is also a good resource which tells us about the city life. So yeah, moving on now, talking about these resources. See, we have a lot of resources with us, archaeological resources, but there are many things which have degraded with the span of time. Maybe they were made of wood, or they were made of a delicate material like mud brick or thatch, so they could not survive. And there are a lot of things which we do not get to know about, like palaces and markets and homes of ordinary people, because they, of course, if a person is an ordinary farmer or ordinary person living in a city, of course he would build a small house for himself, right? He won't build a big palace. And even palaces were made not made of so strongly, like they were mostly made of wood basically. So wood is a delicate material, it will dilapidate with the span of time. So many resources, we could not find many of them, but still there are many sites left which we need to excavate, so as to expand our knowledge about the past. And our archaeologists are doing a good job for in that. Okay, so moving on, I have told you about this garbage dump and all, okay, these structures we have discussed about that. Now moving on to the another resource, okay, another resource which we have is the accounts, okay, accounts of the travelers, account of the sailors who came to India, okay, for trade, or who just came to have an adventure, okay. They were maybe curious to know about the other culture. So all these people, they left their account about the city life. They wrote like how people are living in the city and village, what they do, okay, what are their religious beliefs and all this account is being written by various Greek and Roman sailors, because there was huge amount of Roman and Greek trade was extensive in that period, okay, around 2000 years ago. Basically, there was huge amount of trade going on between the West and India, especially the southern and western India, Gujarat part and the southern part. So yeah, this is all about the account which people left. And here there's one example which is about the port of Bharuch. Okay, Bharuch is in Gujarat, but it is called as Berigeza by this Greek sailor about whose name we don't know. But yeah, he has written something, and we get to know from this that there was plenty of silk and cotton, which yes, we know from other sources as well, that there was a lot of cotton and silk, which was the main reason for the manufacturing of clothes. You see, there was a good manufacture of clothes in India. And Varanasi, okay, Varanasi in northern India, and Madurai, okay, Madurai in south, were the main centers of cloth production. And yes, this is seen from this because there is good amount of export of cotton and silk, okay. And there are other things as well, there are other things, other material which used to be exported from India, and some things which we imported as well, because gold and silver coins, we see a plenty of gold coins from the Roman Empire in the southern part. So yes, there was good export and import in those times, plenty of trade, which led to the growth of these big cities. Okay, now how this trade used to go on? The earliest trade, okay, was in the punched marked coins. These coins are punched marked coins. Okay, these are the earliest coins we have found in the Indian subcontinent. And why do we call these coins as punch marked? Because they are not inscripted. Okay, not inscripted. Keep it in mind. They are punched. Okay, they are made from the metal sheets or from the metal globules. Okay, from metal globules by pressing them. So we get this kind of structure, and then we punch it. Okay, then we punch this flat thing. So due to this, we got these punch marked coins, which we found circulating in the Indian subcontinent till the early centuries. Okay, like till 100 AD, or basically till that time we have found many punched marked coins in the circulation of the economy. So this is about the punch marked coins. Punch marked coins we have talked about. Now moving on. Okay, moving on. Yeah, there is an example given here about the exchange. Yes, see, I have told you that punch marked coins was one of the means to exchange goods, but it was not the only thing, because barter system was also prevalent in those times. You see, what is barter system? If I have something, okay, if there are two people, and one of them has rice, okay, this one has rice, and this one has wheat. So this person, okay, person A wants wheat and person B wants rice. Okay, so person A will tell person B that, yeah, I want wheat and you want rice, so let's exchange it. Okay, let's exchange our goods. So this is called as basically barter system. Okay, coincidence of wants, that I want your good, you want my good, so let's exchange our goods. So this is about the barter system. It was also going on in those times, but it was not the only way, because there were punch marked coins also in the circulation in the economy. Okay, so we are done with this. Now moving on with the cities with many functions. We are given here example of Mathura. Okay, I will tell you what is the importance of Mathura in those times. Mathura, see, basically, if you have a look at the map of India, we see route from northwest to east, okay, and from north to south going on, and at the intersection of this we have Mathura here, okay, which was an important city in those times with the fortification, because important cities had fortification around them, because it was important to protect them, because they are basically the capital cities. And Mathura was the second capital of Kushans. Okay, Kushan rulers. All right, it was the second capital of Kushan rulers, about which we are going to talk in some other video. But yeah, I have just told you this thing. It is important. So Mathura was important not only for the religious purpose, basically, because of course it is important for religious purpose, as it is important for the worship of Lord Krishna, and also there were many Buddhist monasteries and shrines. Okay, Buddhist monasteries and shrines have also been found here in Mathura. So it was not only important for Hinduism, but also for Buddhist and Jain shrines. So yeah, keep it in mind. And the second importance was for the trade, because it lies on the trade route, okay, on the intersection of trade route. So it is important city, it is fortified city, it is being protected basically, and good amount of trade is done here at this place. Okay, so yeah, this was the importance of this city. And how there are many inscriptions also which we found on the structures made in the city, because if the city is big, city is famous, then there will be these shrines and all, and on the walls of these shrines there will be sculptures. Okay, sculpture work done by the craft people. So on the what do we see? That there are many inscriptions which tells us that there are different groups of people, including king and queen, like craft people, the traders, merchants, and weavers, garland makers. Basically everyone, basically they contributed to these religious places. Okay, they contributed, they gave donations uh, to these temples and all. Okay, to these shrines and all. They contributed, they gave donations, they gave money. Okay, or they may also have given food in kind, like rice or wheat or something. So this is also what we found from the inscriptions. Okay, and this is all being told here. I have told you everything, so you can have a look on this. You can have a look here. I have told you all about this. So moving on to the craft people and craft persons, talking about the craft. See, basically the craft people, they formed associations. Okay, basically the traders, merchants, and the craft persons, they worked in groups. Okay, so as to have a bargaining power for one, and for second purpose, so as to have a protection. Okay, because there were many robbers and thieves also in those times. So as to have a protection against the adversaries, and also for having a good bargaining power if they are trading at some place. So it is better to work as a group than to work as an individual. So that is what they do, that is what they did, and they formed shrenis. Okay, shrenis are groups of traders, basically, or craft persons. Okay, so these were basically the groups, the shreni. Okay, remember this term, it can come in your exam, it is an important term. So they worked in shrenis as a group of traders or craft persons. And these shrenis also did a work of a bank. Basically, they worked as a bank, because what was the basic function of shrenis, I will tell you. Okay, first of all, raw material procurement. Okay, raw material, they used to get the raw material and make finished goods with that. Okay, they used to distribute the goods, basically distribute it after making distribute finished products. And the third one is that they used to train the new people. If some person wants to get into some craft or something, so they give training to them. Okay, so this was also an important function of shrenis. The fourth important function is, I have told you here, this is the fourth important function. That is, they worked as a bank, taking money, taking investment from depositors. The depositor will deposit their money to shreni, and in turn they will invest that money. Invest it, give it as a loan to someone who needs money. They will invest it somewhere, and they will when they will get the interest on that, when they will get the interest on their investment, some of it they will give to the shrines and all. Okay, maybe they will give it to shrines, they will donate it. Okay, and the other part they will give to the depositors as a profit on interest. So it was all like profit making business fully for the shrenis. So yeah, this is done. I have told you about the shrenis, and yeah, we can see here northern black polished ware. Okay, so northern black polished ware, basically NBPW, it is a pottery. Okay, it is a pottery which was found in the northern part, basically UP, Punjab, okay, Delhi. In these parts, okay, it was found in the northern part of Indian subcontinent, and that is why we call it as northern. Okay, northern black polished ware. It is a shiny pottery. It has a shiny surface, and it is black in color. Okay, and of course it is evident from the name itself that northern means found in northern part. Black means it is black in color. Polished means it is shiny. Okay, and ware means it is a pottery, or So this is done. You can have a look at it. I have told you everything. I'm not going to underline it because you can just have a look at it. I've told you everything basically. Talking about the rules of spinning and weaving, as we know that there was good manufacture of clothes, and Varanasi Varanasi in the north, and Madurai in the south. They were important places for manufacture of clothes. So of course there will be rules, okay, for the spinning and weaving, which we get to know from the Arthashastra. Arthashastra is written by Kautilya. Okay, Kautilya was a counselor in the court of Chandragupta Maurya. Okay, Chandragupta Maurya, he was a counselor. Okay, and he wrote this Arthashastra. It's a work on polity. Okay, Arthashastra. It basically tells us about the political life, about the rules governing the society in those times, written by Kautilya. Okay, so this is given here, and this is the rules, that women can do the weaving and spinning of the cloth, and what are the rules. They have to get the clothes from the superintendent, and if they don't do the work, then how will they be punished and all. It is just a rule, basically just being told in the Arthashastra. Have a look at it. Okay, so coming on to the last part, this is Arikamedu. Okay, Arikamedu is basically it's a place in Puducherry. Okay, Puducherry. So it's in the southern part. Okay, it's in the southern part of the Indian subcontinent. So you can expect good amount of trade. Okay, trade, as I told you many times in this video as well, that there was good amount of trade from Gujarat as well. Okay, from this part as well, and from here also, southern part. So we have lot of objects which we found here in Arikamedu in Puducherry, which shows us that there was good trade going on between Rome, okay, and India. Good trade, good amount of trade. How do we know this? We find lot of potteries. Okay, pottery which from the Mediterranean region. Okay, from the Mediterranean region, from the Rome. Okay, Roman lamps, glassware, gems which we have found made from the special material, special costly beads, red glazed pottery. So there are 2-3 kinds of pottery. First of all, amphorae. Okay, amphorae, it is given here as well. Yeah. So this pottery was from Mediterranean region. Okay, which was found in Arikamedu. Second one is Aretine ware. Aretine, sorry for my handwriting, it is totally pathetic. Aretine ware. This was also found in the southern part, Arikamedu. And Aretine is basically a city. Okay, it is a city in the Italy. That is why this pottery is known as Aretine ware, because it reflects that this pottery has been imported from the western countries. So yeah, these all things are found at the Arikamedu. These lamps, glassware and all, gems and jars. Amphorae is basically a double-handed jar. Okay, it's basically a double-handed jar. Like this is a jar, and there are 2 handles on it. Okay, there are 2 handles. So this kind of jar is like called as amphorae. And second one is Aretine ware, which is based on the city. Aretine is a city in the Italy. So this pottery was based on that city, came from that city. Okay, so moving on now. Here you can see an inscription in the Brahmi script. Okay, Brahmi script. You can see the inscription in Tamil language, because every language has a script. So yeah, this is an inscription, and here we are being told, yeah, there is a small tank also we found in the Arikamedu, which may be used, could have been used for dyeing of clothes. Okay, dyeing of cloth, or for some other purpose as well. There were beads from the precious stones. I told you already about the glassware we found here. So yeah, all this shows that there was good amount of trade going on between the Roman Empire in the west and the Indian subcontinent, especially the southern part. Okay, so yeah, we are done with this chapter here, and this is a box given regarding Rome. Rome is basically one of the oldest cities. Okay, one of the oldest cities in the Roman Empire. And Augustus was one of the important rulers of Rome, which made many structures like amphitheaters. Basically, it is a place where people can come, people can sit around and enjoy the drama. Amphitheaters, or he made many public buildings, public bathing for the bathing purpose, so where men and women can come and take bath at separate times and relax and enjoy. So he made many structures basically. And this Rome basically grew into a big city around the same time when the cities in the Ganga valley, the Mahajanpadas and all, when they were growing, it also grew around the same time. So it was like a parallel, like we can say that it was a parallel time. When the cities Mahajanpadas were coming up on the west, we see the Rome. Okay. And we also have a statement that Augustus is telling Rome was in a dilapidated condition, broken condition, and he made it into a city of marble, and he did a lot of work, praising himself basically. So yeah, this is all about Rome given here. This is an aqueduct, so as to supply the water, for the city, basically for different purposes like taking bath, for the toilets and fountains. So these aqueducts are also being made by the rulers in Rome. So all these things, it is telling us about that Rome was also growing at a fast pace at that time, and Augustus was an important ruler. All right. And Roman Empire basically covered around the full Europe and northern Africa and West Asia. If you look at the map, it was a big empire, basically a huge empire. Okay, so we are done with the whole chapter. I hope everything is clear to you. I tried I tried to explain everything basically, point by point. But if you still have any doubt, then you can ask me in the comment section below, or if you want me to make a video on any other topic which you think is important, I can make a video on that as well. Please tell me in the comment section below. And I hope everything is clear, everything is crystal clear. I did not go into much depth because we have to confine ourselves with the NCERT here with the chapter. But when I make the videos on the for the other classes, like for 11th and 12th, at that time we will go into much depth. Okay, and we will cover all the topics in a more holistic and comprehensive way. So with this, we have come to the end of chapter. I hope you enjoyed the video, you learned something new, and I'll see you in the next video. Till then, take care. Bye bye. Jai Hind.